I'm truly honored, and I've been praying in the broadest way possible to hopefully offer some words that might be helpful in some small way, and look forward to broadening the conversation with all of you and learning from your wisdom. I grew up in San Diego, California. I think between the ocean and the streets. My mom ran a sort of evangelical version of a Catholic worker house. And so from an early age, I was living and working with folks who are unhoused, particularly youth, and living into this question of how, in a broad way, can I render a loving presence for folks and be an empowering, authentic, life-giving relationship. And that question is just something that I carried with me that I feel like God called me into. I carried at school as an undergraduate, master's degree student, did a PhD at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, um, and really focused on specifically on the streets of Seattle, where I basically lived this question of, with respect to folks who are on the streets, what is their everyday life like? What are they really going through? Um, what is their spirituality like? That's something that hadn't been really explored in the academic literature before. What difference is spirituality making in their own life? And I think most critically, and I'll conclude here, I hope this is the question that really defines and shapes my life. What does it look like to co-create a more loving love with people experiencing not only homelessness, but housing insecurity? Through spiritual companionship in a personal way, but also sort of companioning people by way of our politics, showing up at city council meeting, voting, uh, demanding that certain programs be funded at the government level, and also just sort of companioning them as we enter into conversations about homelessness that can be, Seifu, as you know, so charged, so heated, sometimes so narrow and even cruel. I often wonder about how our discourse about homelessness may be a sort of cruel force that also causes homelessness. And so, how do we be companions in the space of conversation about what people are going through and how to alleviate their suffering and help them flourish? So I was a PhD student at the Graduate Theological Union and got my very first teaching opportunity at UC Berkeley. A colleague of mine invited me to co-teach a course with him on research methods, and I was just sort of hooked. Like I love being in the classroom, love having conversations that matter and that make like a practical, efficacious difference in people's lives. Um, After that experience at UC Berkeley, I went to Seattle University and I taught for many years there. And just such a beautiful, beautiful school and place, and delighted in learning with students there. Fundamentally, I'm interested in what people do with, maybe we could say for now, their soul energy,
Mm,
how they direct it, how it's sometimes directed for them by various violences or beauties that they encounter in their life. Um, and so while I focus on theology, I'm more sort of attuned to the spiritual life, and I use the anthropological research method of ethnography, which I was thankfully able to experience training in at UC Berkeley and Stanford, to kind of understand what spirituality is like really on the ground and in people's real lives to the extent that, I'm able to understand and have access to that. I think that uh, maybe the most important thing I can think of is uh, being grounded in humility, um, and really keeping this question always open. For me, and I imagine for you, for many people, at the end of the day, we're in a mystery. We're in a love mystery. and people are mysterious. And so important, I think, to remember to wonder about what people are going through, what their spiritualities are like, what difference it makes in their lives. And potentially, if you have the privilege to talk to them about it and to have, questions. I, have some insight from the ethnographic research that I did from 2016 to 2023. And, I'm still in touch with a lot of the people that I spent time with on the streets over those years. Did about 100 interviews, wrote about 1,000 pages of field notes, took hundreds of photographs, not only listened with folks on the streets, but really tried to the extent that I could, um, participate in their lives. So first and foremost, really being rooted in a question of I'm in relationship to a mystery. In all likelihood, you know, one of the clearest things about homelessness is people are homeless because they don't have homes. They don't have homes because they can't afford them, and they can't afford them because we're in an affordable housing affordability crisis. And, the majority of people in this country are a paycheck or an illness away from being unhoused themselves. And so they're trying to survive. And in the midst of this brutal survival, where your life is literally at stake and you may die, and a number of people that I got to know on the streets who I consider friends did in fact die. It's devastating every day, just harrowing realities. And so, in all likelihood, their spirituality is helping them survive in some way. Um, and I think particularly tend the stigma that homelessness engenders in people, where your identity is, I don't want to say ruined, but maybe close to a kind of social ruin, and you just feel worthless. You feel like trash. You feel like people don't want you around, like they want to sweep you away. They want to categorize you as this or that, and it's your fault. It's not really our fault collectively as a society that's created this kind of world that pushes people into homelessness. And so, you know, um, reminding people that they're irrevocably loved, that the truth of the universe is that they belong, that they're good. And the spiritual companion's role, I think, is to enter into, to the extent that they can, the reality of the other, whether it's just like a smile, which some people tell me is literally life-saving. Someone smiled or waved at them or gave them like a really good burger. Beautiful, life-changing. Or, maybe it's entering into a relationship more deeply, which, of course, would need to come through skillful practice and a community that can really train you to be in relation that can be tough at times. But if I may just say one more thing, I think it also means, and we'll talk about this in the webinar, educating ourselves about the histories of homelessness in the United States and around the world, having a social analysis of homelessness, so with your spiritual communities, really doing the work of education. And as I said earlier, you know, entering into the political world so that we can have more affordable homes and so that programs that support the poor are adequately funded. I will say I try always to again be grounded in humility, to move by the grace of the love mystery, God, whatever sort of language we may use, to be speaking to others who know more than I do, in terms of working with this, to have a spiritual director myself. So, in a sense, with great joy, but also fear and trembling. Um, and, let me say that it is such a privilege to be in relationship with anyone. Our life is so precious and so vulnerable. And as I'm sure SDI community can appreciate and well knows, what an honor to be able to hear someone's amazing story. That's just such a joy. So it's not like, I'm hearing a story and I see that this person has a really wounded sense of self that, of course, I know I can't save this person, but I want to do whatever is reasonably mine to do, as St. Francis put it, to tend and let them know how amazing they are, no matter what they've done. And no matter what they will do, their belovedness will always remain. But it's sort of easy because people are just that way, and you see them, and I'm actually looking at a photo of a friend I got to know on the streets, who's with his dog, and he's reaching into his bag to give a notepad to someone who just needed something to write on. You see, like, even though it's this violent life and death situation, people are struggling profoundly for their survival, that they like put others first still. There's this book about homelessness. I can't remember where it is, but it's called My Dog Always Eats First. They make sure their dog is fed before they are. It's not always this way, of course. Sometimes it's really ugly and brutal, and it's hard to wake up in the morning. Sometimes when you are around all of this work or all of this kind of struggle, but you also see just amazing moral beauty that what a delight to share, like how amazing, people are. Dear SDI community, please come and have a conversation. I am excited to share some of the work that I've done over the years with folks who are experiencing homelessness and housing insecurity, and also learn about your wisdom and your insight, and look forward to, co-creating more compassion and love in our world together. So I hope to see you there.